Two wounded officers crashed through the Colorado wilderness with killers hunting them through the storm. Their cruiser was burning somewhere behind them. Their radios were dead. Every shadow could be death. When Elena saw the cabin light through the rain, she didn't know if salvation waited inside or another enemy. But the man who opened that door had survived places far darker than any mountain storm, and his German shepherd had already counted the threats before the first desperate knock even landed. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. If you believe no one should face the darkness alone, subscribe and stay until the end. The knock came hard and desperate. 3 rapid strikes that rattled the cabin door against its frame. Marcus Cole set down the soldering iron and listened. His hands didn't shake. His breathing didn't change. 8 years of Navy SEAL training had taught him that panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. The knock came again. Harder this time. Titan rose from his spot near the wood stove. The 7-year-old German shepherd moved without sound, his black and tan coat catching the lamplight as he positioned himself between Marcus and the door. A low growl built in his chest. Not loud, not aggressive, just aware. "Easy," Marcus murmured. He crossed to the side window and cleared a small circle in the condensation with his knuckle. Rain slashed sideways across the glass, but he could make out 2 figures on his porch, one supporting the other, both soaked through and shaking. The first figure raised a badge toward the window. "Please," a woman's voice strained and desperate. "We need help." Marcus studied them for 3 more seconds. The woman was young, maybe mid-20s, her dark hair plastered to her face. The man beside her was bigger, older, and his head was bleeding. Neither of them moved like they were setting up an ambush. But Marcus had seen good setups before. In Kandahar, in Fallujah, in a dozen places that still visited him at 3 in the morning. He unbolted the door and opened it 6 inches, keeping his body angled behind the frame. "State your business." "Officer Elena Reyes." The woman held up her badge again, hand trembling. "This is Deputy Sheriff Jack Brennan. Our vehicle was ambushed 2 miles east. Radio's dead. We've got men pursuing us and nowhere else to go." Marcus looked at the man. Brennan's eyes were glassy, unfocused. Blood ran freely from a gash above his left ear, mixing with rain on his collar. His breathing came shallow and fast. "How many pursuing?" "3 that I saw. Maybe more." "Armed?" "Yes." Titan's growl deepened. His head swung toward the tree-line ears, rotating like satellite dishes, picking up a distant signal. Marcus made his decision. "Inside. Now, move slow." Elena half-carried Brennan through the doorway. Marcus closed the door behind them and threw all 3 bolts. Then he killed the main lamp, dropping the cabin into shadows, broken only by the wood stove's orange glow. "Sit him there." He pointed to a chair near the heat. "Don't touch anything else." Elena guided Brennan into the chair. The deputy slumped forward, pressing his palm against the wound on his head. His uniform was torn at the shoulder and caked with mud. "Thank you," Elena breathed. "God, thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Marcus moved to a cabinet and retrieved a first aid kit. "Titan watch." The German shepherd positioned himself facing the door, body low, every muscle coiled with readiness. His amber eyes never blinked. Elena stared at the dog. "He's trained," Marcus said. "Former military working dog. 3 tours in Afghanistan before he took shrapnel and got medically retired. He knows what hunting sounds like." He knelt in front of Brennan and examined the head wound. The deputy's eyes tried to focus on him and failed. "How long ago did this happen?" "Maybe 30 minutes. Elena's voice cracked. They hit us from both sides. Ran us off the ridge road. Jack got thrown when we rolled. You rolled the vehicle into a ravine. It caught fire. We barely got out. Marcus cleaned the wound with practiced efficiency. The gash was deep but clean. Brennan would need stitches eventually, but the immediate danger was shock and blood loss. Hold this. He pressed a gauze pad into Elena's hand and guided it to the wound. Firm pressure. Don't let up. She nodded, her jaw tight with determination. Marcus stood and crossed to his equipment table. An array of radio equipment sat there, handheld units, a spectrum analyzer, a laptop showing waveform patterns. He picked up his most sensitive scanner and powered it on. The needle twitched once, then flatlined. That's not right, he said quietly. What is it? Your radio didn't die because of the storm. He adjusted the frequency, tried again. Same result. Someone's jamming communications in this area. Military-grade suppression. Elena's face went pale. That's not possible. Drug runners don't have that kind of equipment. Marcus turned to look at her. Who said anything about drug runners? The silence stretched. Titan's ears swiveled toward the back of the cabin. His growl returned softer now, but more insistent. We weren't tracking drug runners, Elena said finally. Her voice dropped. We were investigating something else. What? She hesitated, looked at Brennan, who had closed his eyes and was breathing through clenched teeth. Women have been disappearing from the small towns around here. 6 in the past 4 months. Young women, vulnerable women. Nobody was looking for them because nobody thought they mattered. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Human trafficking. We found evidence that they're using the old mining tunnels to move victims. Jack and I were the only ones willing to push the investigation. Tonight we got close. Too close. How close? We found the entrance, an abandoned mine called Blackwell Shaft, maybe 8 miles from here. We saw vehicles, armed guards, and then... Her voice broke. Then they were behind us, like they knew exactly where we'd be. Titan suddenly barked, sharp and urgent. Once, twice. Marcus was at the window in 2 strides. Through the rain, barely visible against the tree line, a flashlight beam swept across the forest floor. Then another, then a third. They're here, he said. Elena's hand went to her sidearm. How many? 3 lights. Could be more without. We need to call for backup. There has to be some way to... The jamming extends at least 2 miles. Marcus was already moving pulling items from a closet. A tactical vest. A pair of night vision binoculars. A hunting knife that had seen use in places he didn't talk about. Probably further. Whoever these people are, they came prepared. Brennan stirred in the chair. Elena? She was at his side instantly. Jack, stay still. My badge. His words came slurred but urgent. Check my badge. What? When they ran us off, one of them said something. Said they always knew where I was. Said... He winced, hand pressing harder against his wound. Said the department takes care of its own. Elena's face drained of color. Jack, that doesn't make sense. Check the badge. Her hands shook as she unclipped the shield from his belt. She turned it over, examined the back, ran her fingers along the edges. There's nothing here. Just... She stopped. Her thumbnail had caught on something. A tiny seam in the metal backing that shouldn't have been there. Marcus handed her the hunting knife. Open it. She pried at the seam. The back panel of the badge popped off, revealing a hollow space underneath. Inside, a device the size of a hearing aid battery blinked with a faint red light. GPS tracker, Marcus said grimly. Embedded in a sheriff's badge. That's not something criminals do. That's something institutions do. Elena stared at the blinking light, like it had personally betrayed her. They knew. The whole time we were investigating, they knew exactly where we were. Who issued that badge? The department. Standard issue when Jack got promoted last year. Then someone in your department, Marcus said slowly, is part of this operation. The flashlight beams outside had stopped moving. They held steady now, pointed at the cabin from 3 different angles. They're not searching anymore, Elena whispered. They're surrounding us. Marcus disabled the tracker with a quick twist that crushed its circuitry. He dropped the destroyed device on the floor and looked at Elena with eyes that had seen situations exactly this hopeless before. Officer Reyes, in the next few minutes we're going to find out how badly these people want you dead. I need to know right now. Is there anything else you haven't told me? Elena's chin lifted despite the fear in her eyes. We found a ledger, financial records connecting the trafficking operation to someone inside law enforcement. Names, dates, payments. I photographed every page before we ran. The evidence is on my phone. Where's the phone now? Waterproof case, inside pocket. Then they're not here to kill you. Marcus checked the window again. The lights hadn't moved. They're here to recover that evidence. Killing you is just the cleanup afterward. Titan's bark came again, more urgent. He was pacing now, moving from the door to the back wall and back again. Something outside had him tracking multiple positions at once. Marcus knelt beside the dog and placed his hand on Titan's broad shoulder. He felt the tension vibrating through every muscle. How many boys show me? Titan moved to the front door and held, then the east window, then the rear wall. 4 distinct positions before returning to center. 4 now. Another one joined them while we were talking. Elena's hand tightened on her weapon. What do? We don't panic. Panic is what gets people killed. Marcus stood and faced her directly. I've been in worse situations than this. I've been in situations where everyone around me died, and I had to keep moving anyway. The only difference between the people who survive and the people who don't is decision-making under pressure. Do you understand? Yes. Your deputy needs medical attention. You can't give him here. These men outside want evidence that will put powerful people in prison. And somewhere out there are women who have been taken from their families and are waiting for someone to find them. He paused. That's what we're fighting for tonight. Not just ourselves. Them too. A sharp crack echoed from outside. Not gunfire wood splitting under pressure. Someone was testing the integrity of the rear wall. Brennan forced himself more upright in the chair. Color was returning to his face as adrenaline overrode his injury. I spent 20 years believing in that badge, he said hoarsely, believing it meant something, and now you're telling me the same people I trusted. He trailed off, swallowing hard. The badge is a piece of metal, Marcus said. It doesn't mean anything by itself. The only thing that matters is what the person wearing it chooses to do. Another crack from outside, closer to the corner this time. They're probing for weak points, Marcus continued. Standard technique. Apply pressure at multiple positions, see where the defense breaks first. How do you know that? Because I used to be the one doing it. Elena processed that information in silence. When she spoke again, her voice had steadied. What's the plan? First, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Marcus moved to his equipment table and retrieved a small device, a parabolic microphone connected to a headset. They've jammed our transmissions, but they're still talking to each other. Radio discipline in civilian operations is usually sloppy. He cracked the window just enough to extend the microphone's dish toward the tree line. Static filled the headset for a moment, then resolved into voices. In position. Package confirmed inside. 2 plus the homeowner. Copy. What about the dog? Big German Shepherd. Looks alert. Could be a problem. Then remove the problem first. Silent approach. Window breach on my signal. Marcus pulled back the microphone. His face had gone very still. They know we're here. They know about Titan, and they're planning to breach through the windows in a coordinated assault. When? Soon. They're just waiting for confirmation from their leader. Titan had stopped pacing. He stood rigid near the door, a deep, continuous growl rolling from his chest. He understood the tone in those voices, even if he couldn't parse the words. He knew the sound of men preparing to do violence. There's something else, Marcus said. The voice giving orders, I recognized the radio protocol. It's law enforcement tactical communication. These aren't hired criminals. They're trained officers. Elena's weapon rose instinctively. Officers, deputies maybe, state patrol. I can't tell which agency, but they've had tactical training. They know how to clear a building. They know how to neutralize threats. Then how do we fight them? We don't. Marcus crossed to a cabinet near the back wall and pulled out a backpack already loaded with supplies. Not directly. There's too many of them, and they're too well trained. Our only advantage is that they think this is a containment operation. They're expecting scared civilians waiting to be captured. They're not expecting someone who knows their playbook. He handed the backpack to Elena. There's a game trail behind the cabin that leads down to Cooper Creek. Follow the water northwest for half a mile, and you'll hit the old logging road. Cell service picks up about a mile past that point. You want us to run? I want you to survive. You have evidence that can expose this entire operation. That evidence is worthless if you're dead. I'm not leaving you here alone. You're not leaving me. Marcus whistled softly, and Titan immediately moved to his side. Titan is going with you. He knows these woods better than any of those men out there. He'll get you to safety. Brennan struggled to his feet, swaying but determined. She's right. We don't leave people behind. That's not how we do things. Deputy, with respect, you can barely stand. You'll slow her down and get both of you killed. Marcus's voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel. The best thing you can do right now is stay here with me and make noise. Let them think both targets are still in the cabin. While Elena runs alone in the dark with a combat-trained German shepherd who has pulled wounded operators out of Taliban territory. Marcus met Brennan's eyes. I would trust him with my life. I have trusted him with my life. He won't let anything happen to her. A new sound came from outside. Multiple footsteps moving in coordinated patterns, spreading wider around the cabin's perimeter. We're out of time, Marcus said. Officer Reyes, Elena, you need to go now. Elena looked at Brennan. The deputy's face was pale, streaked with blood and rain, but his eyes were clear. Go, he said. Get that evidence to someone who can use it. Find out who did this to us. Jack, that's an order. He tried to smile and almost managed it. I'm still your supervising officer for another few hours. Don't make me write you up. Elena's eyes glistened, but she nodded. She gripped her phone through her jacket pocket, feeling the weight of the evidence she carried. Titan. Marcus pointed to Elena. Guard. Escort. Go. The German shepherd moved to Elena's side without hesitation. He pressed against her leg, solid and warm, his presence a promise. Marcus pulled open the back door just wide enough for them to slip through. Wind and rain rushed in, carrying the smell of wet pine and churned earth. Stay low. Stay quiet. Follow Titan. He'll know if anyone's close before you do. Elena stepped into the darkness. At the threshold, she turned back. What's your name? I never asked. Marcus Cole. Thank you, Marcus. Thank me when this is over. She disappeared into the storm. Titan's dark form moved beside her, barely visible against the trees, guiding her downslope toward the creek. Marcus closed the door and turned to face Brennan. Can you hold a weapon? I can try. Marcus retrieved a shotgun from a locked case and pressed it into the deputy's hands. 12 gauge. 5 rounds loaded safety here. Point it at anything that comes through that door and pull the trigger. What are you going to do? Buy them time. Marcus picked up a metal pot from the kitchen and hurled it against the far wall. The crash echoed through the cabin. He followed it by knocking over a chair, stomping across the floorboards, creating chaos and noise. Outside, the movement stopped. The hunters had heard the commotion. They would be reassessing, recalculating. Good. Every second they hesitated was another second Elena gained. "Hey," Marcus shouted toward the window. "I know you're out there. You want to talk, or are you planning to stand in the rain all night?" "Silence." Then a voice called back, amplified by a bullhorn. "Marcus Cole, former Navy SEAL honorably discharged, 2019. We know who you are. We know you've got our targets inside. Send them out and you can go back to your quiet little life up here. Nobody needs to get hurt." Marcus smiled grimly. They'd done their homework, probably ran his plates or his utility records as soon as they realized where their targets had gone. "And if I don't, then we come in and take them, and you become a tragic casualty of a home invasion gone wrong. Your choice." Brennan's hands tightened on the shotgun. "They're going to kill us anyway. Once they have the evidence, they can't leave witnesses." "I know." Marcus was already planning 3 moves ahead. "But they don't know Elena's gone yet. As long as they think both of you are still in here, they'll try to contain the situation. They want this clean. Professional. Bodies that tell a simple story. So what do? We make it messy." Marcus picked up the destroyed tracker from the floor and held it up to the window. "Looking for this bad news, your GPS is offline. You'll have to do this the hard way." A long pause. Then the bullhorn crackled again. "You've got 60 seconds to open that door, or what you'll huff and puff." 45 seconds. Marcus turned to Brennan. "When they breach, they'll come through the windows first. Flashbangs or smoke to disorient, then entry team through the front. Stay low behind the stove. It's cast iron, it'll stop most rounds. You've done this before. Too many times. 30 seconds. Marcus moved to the corner where darkness pooled deepest and pressed his back against the wall. In his hand, the hunting knife reflected no light at all. 15 seconds. Outside, Titan's growl had faded into the distance. Elena was moving. She was running. She had a chance. Marcus closed his eyes for just a moment and let himself remember why he'd come to this mountain in the first place. To escape the violence. To find peace. To stop being the weapon other people pointed at their problems. But some things couldn't be run from. Some fights came to you whether you wanted them or not. "Time's up." Glass shattered. The night exploded into chaos. And somewhere in the darkness below, a woman ran for her life, with a faithful dog guiding her through the storm, carrying evidence that could burn an empire of evil to the ground. Glass exploded inward as 2 windows shattered simultaneously. Smoke canisters followed, spinning across the floor and filling the cabin with thick white clouds that burned Marcus's eyes and throat. He didn't panic. Panic was death. Marcus dropped low, pressing against the wall, where the smoke hadn't reached yet. His ears tracked the sounds boots hitting the porch, weight shifting against the doorframe, the metallic click of weapons being readied. "Brennan down," he shouted. The deputy had already thrown himself behind the cast-iron stove. The shotgun trembled in his grip, but his finger stayed off the trigger. Discipline. Good. The front door burst open. 2 figures rushed through, moving in tactical formation weapons, sweeping the smoke-filled room. Marcus waited. Let them commit to their entry path. Let them think they owned the space. The first man passed within arm's reach. Marcus moved like water fluid, silent, inevitable. His arm snaked around the man's throat from behind, knife pressing against the tactical vest's gap at the collar. The second man spun, weapon rising, but Marcus had already repositioned his hostage as a shield. "Drop it," Marcus said calmly, "or your friend here learns what his jugular looks like." "You're making a mistake." The second man's voice was steady, professional. "We have this place surrounded. You can't win." "I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to have a conversation." A third figure appeared in the doorway, taller than the others, moving with the confident authority of command. Even through the dissipating smoke, Marcus could make out the insignia on his tactical vest. Sheriff's Department, just as he'd suspected. "Stand down," the commander ordered his men. Then to Marcus, "You're Cole Wright, the SEAL, former. Once a SEAL, always a SEAL. That's what they say." The commander stepped fully into the cabin hands, visible, but not raised. "I'm Sergeant Walker, and I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. Your men just threw flashbangs into my home. I'd say we're well past wrong feet." "A misunderstanding. We were told hostile forces had taken refuge here. We thought we were protecting you." "Protecting me?" Marcus laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Is that what you call hunting two police officers through the mountains?" Walker's expression didn't change. "Officer Reyes and Deputy Brennan are persons of interest in an ongoing investigation. They've stolen classified evidence and fled custody. We're here to bring them back safely." "Safely?" Brennan's voice came from behind the stove, thick with anger and pain. "You ran us off a cliff, Walker. You tried to kill us." "Deputy Brennan." Walker turned toward the voice, his tone shifting to something that sounded almost like concern. "You're injured. Let us help you. This doesn't have to escalate further. I saw your men's faces. I know who was driving that truck that hit us. You suffered a head trauma. You're confused." "I'm not confused." Brennan struggled to his feet, using the shotgun as a brace. Blood had soaked through the bandage on his head, but his eyes blazed with clarity. "I'm finally seeing clearly for the first time in years." Marcus maintained his grip on the hostage, watching Walker's micro-expressions. The man was calculating odds, measuring distances, deciding whether to push or pull back. "Where's Officer Reyes?" Walker asked quietly. "Not here. The tracker shows..." "The tracker is in pieces on my floor." Marcus kicked the destroyed device toward Walker's feet. "Technology fails. You should know that." Something shifted in Walker's eyes. The professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something colder underneath. Something desperate. "Mr. Cole, I'm going to be direct with you. Officer Reyes is carrying evidence that could destroy lives. Good lives. People who have served this community for decades." "People who traffic women, you mean?" "That's not..." Walker stopped himself. Regrouped. "This is more complicated than you understand." "Then explain it to me." "I can't do that." "Can't or won't?" "Both." Walker took a step forward. "But I can tell you this, if that evidence reaches the wrong hands, people will die. Not criminals. Innocent people. Families. Children." Marcus felt the hostage tense in his grip. The man was getting ready to make a move, probably on Walker's signal. "That's quite a speech," Marcus said. "You practice it on all your victims before you make them disappear." Walker's jaw tightened. "Last chance, Mr. Cole. Tell us where Reyes went, and you can go back to your quiet life. Nobody needs to know you were involved. And Brennan, Deputy Brennan will receive medical attention and a fair hearing." "A fair hearing?" Brennan laughed bitterly. "Like Sarah Chen got, like Maria Gonzalez, those women had families too, Walker. And you shipped them off like cargo." The name hit Walker like a physical blow. His composure cracked visibly. "How do you know those names?" "Because I've been investigating this operation for 6 months. Because Elena found the ledger your people were stupid enough to keep. Every transaction, every name, every dollar that changed hands. Walker's hand moved toward his sidearm. Marcus reacted instantly, shoving his hostage forward into Walker and diving sideways. The cabin erupted into chaos, shouts, struggling bodies, the crash of furniture overturning. Brennan fired the shotgun into the ceiling. The blast was deafening, freezing everyone in place for one critical second. "Next one goes through somebody," Brennan roared. "Everybody freeze." Walker had his weapon drawn but not aimed. His hostage was on the floor, gasping. The second officer had retreated to the doorway, uncertain. Marcus recovered his footing knife, still in hand. "Sergeant, I think you should leave now. This isn't over. It is for tonight. Your window for a clean operation just closed. You've got shots fired, witnesses, and your target is already gone. Cut your losses." Walker's face contorted with barely suppressed rage. But he was smart enough to recognize the truth. Whatever he'd planned for this cabin, it had failed. "You've just made yourself an enemy," Walker said to Marcus. "Both of you. There's nowhere in this state you can hide. I've had worse enemies than you. Not like this. Not with what we have at stake." Walker signaled to his men. They retreated through the door, melting back into the storm. The sounds of their movement faded, replaced by wind and rain and the settling groans of the damaged cabin. Brennan lowered the shotgun slowly. His arms were shaking, his face pale as chalk. "Are they really gone?" Marcus moved to the window, watching the flashlight beams retreat into the tree line. "For now, they'll regroup, try to track Elena. She's got a head start. Maybe 20 minutes. Depends on how fast they can mobilize vehicles to cut her off." Brennan slumped against the wall, sliding down until he sat on the floor. The shotgun clattered beside him. "I can't believe it. Walker. I've known him for 15 years. Our kids played Little League together." Marcus retrieved his first aid kit and knelt beside the deputy. "Hold still. Your bandage is soaked through." "How does a man do that? How does he smile at you across the barbecue while he's running a trafficking ring?" "Compartmentalization. Everybody's the hero of their own story." "That's not an answer." "No, it's not." Marcus worked on the wound, his movements gentle despite the urgency of the situation. "But it's the only one I've got." Brennan winced as the antiseptic touched raw flesh. "Elena's not going to make it alone. Even with your dog, she doesn't know these mountains. Titan knows them. He'll keep her moving in the right direction. And if they catch her before she reaches help?" Marcus didn't answer. They both knew what that would mean. "I have to go after her," Brennan said. "You can barely walk." "I don't care." "Deputy, her name is Elena Reyes. She's 26 years old. She joined the force because her sister disappeared 8 years ago, and nobody looked for her. Nobody cared." Brennan's voice cracked. "She's been fighting her whole life for girls like her sister, and I sent her into those woods alone." Marcus sat back on his heels. He'd heard that tone before. In Afghanistan, when men talked about the people they couldn't save. The weight that never lifted. "You didn't send her. I did. Same difference?" "No, it's not." Marcus stood and offered his hand. "I've lost people, Brennan. People I was supposed to protect. The guilt doesn't go away, but it doesn't have to be the end either." Brennan took the hand and let Marcus pull him to his feet. "What do you mean?" "I mean we're not done yet. Elena has the evidence, but we have something too. We have Walker's desperation. Men who are desperate make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "He threatened me, said there was nowhere in the state I could hide. That means he's scared of what happens if this goes federal. Local corruption can be contained. Federal investigation can't." Brennan's eyes sharpened. "The FBI field office in Denver. If we could reach them directly, we'd need proof, more than Elena's photographs. The ledger she found there might be copies. The mine shaft where they're holding the victim's Blackwell shaft. If we could document what's there. Marcus shook his head. That's suicide. Walker will have men positioned there now. Not if he thinks we're running the other direction. Not if he's focused entirely on catching Elena. The logic was sound in a desperate, insane kind of way. Walker had committed his resources to the chase. The operation itself might be vulnerable. You can barely stand, Marcus repeated. I stood up when it mattered just now, didn't I? That was adrenaline. Then I'll find more adrenaline. Brennan pushed himself off the wall, testing his balance. His legs held. Barely. Cole, I've spent 20 years being a good soldier, following orders, trusting the system, and the system was rotten the whole time. I can't undo that. But I can do something now. Marcus studied the man in front of him, beaten, bloody, exhausted, but not broken. Something in his eyes had hardened into resolution. If we do this, Marcus said slowly, we do it my way. You follow my lead, you don't argue, you don't play hero, understood, understood. And when this is over, if we survive, you tell Elena the truth. Brennan frowned. What truth? I saw how you look at her. She deserves to know. Color rose in Brennan's pale face. That's not we're professionals. It's not appropriate. Neither is dying with things unsaid. Marcus retrieved his tactical vest and began checking gear. I learned that the hard way. Don't make the same mistake. Brennan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was raw. She's the best partner I've ever had. The bravest person I know. And every day I've watched her chase justice for those missing women while I stayed safe behind my desk. I've felt like a coward. Then stop feeling and start moving. We've got about 2 hours before dawn. That's our window. Marcus handed Brennan a tactical flashlight, a handheld radio useless with the jammer active but potentially valuable later, and a backup pistol. Can you shoot with that hand? Brennan flexed his fingers. They moved through not smoothly. Enough. Enough will have to do. They moved to the back door, the same one Elena and Titan had slipped through minutes ago. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle, and through the clouds Marcus could see the first hints of moonlight. The mine is 8 miles northeast, Brennan said. Old logging roads most of the way, but the last 2 miles are rough terrain. I know a shortcut through Miller's Canyon. Cuts 3 miles off if you can handle the climb. I can handle it. Marcus opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and distant smoke. Cole. Brennan's hand caught his arm. Why are you doing this? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything. Marcus looked out into the darkness toward the mountains he'd called home for 5 years. The quiet he'd sought. The peace he'd never quite found. A year after I left the service, I read about a girl who went missing from a town just like this one. 15 years old. The investigation went cold in a week. Nobody cared enough to keep looking. What happened to her? I don't know. That's the point. Marcus stepped out into the night. Maybe tonight we find out what happened to all of them. They moved into the forest, leaving behind the damaged cabin with its shattered windows and smoke-stained walls. Behind them, the storm continued to retreat. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness, Elena ran with Titan at her side, carrying evidence that could expose the truth. And above them all, the mountains held their secrets, waiting to see who would survive until dawn. Elena's lungs burned as she scrambled down the rocky slope toward Cooper Creek. Titan moved ahead of her, his dark form barely visible against the trees, pausing every few seconds to check that she still followed. The dog was incredible. Every time she stumbled, he was there pressing against her leg to steady her. Every time she hesitated at a fork in the trail, he chose the path without hesitation. But they weren't alone. She could hear them now, voices calling to each other through the forest flashlight beams, sweeping the slopes above her position. They'd found her trail faster than she'd hoped. Titan suddenly froze. His ears flattened, and a low, warning growl rumbled in his chest. Elena dropped behind a fallen log, pressing herself into the mud and leaves. Through the branches, she could see a flashlight beam cutting through the trees maybe 50 yards uphill. "Check the creek bed," a voice called. "She'll follow the water." They knew. Of course they knew. These were cops trained in pursuit and tracking. Running to the creek had been obvious. Titan's nose touched her hand. He tugged gently at her sleeve, pulling her toward a dense thicket of brush she would never have noticed on her own. She crawled after him, branches scratching her face, thorns tearing at her jacket. The space was tight, claustrophobic, but it opened into a small, natural hollow beneath an ancient pine's root system. Titan pressed against her, his warmth the only comfort in the cold darkness. His breathing had slowed, controlled, and silent, as if he understood the need for absolute quiet. Footsteps approached. Heavy boots on wet leaves. The flashlight beam swept directly over their hiding spot, lighting up the branches above Elena's head. She stopped breathing. "Nothing here," the voice said. Male young, frustrated. "She must have gone further downstream. Keep looking. Walker wants her found before dawn." The footsteps moved on. The voices faded. Elena counted to 60 before she let herself breathe again. "Good boy," she whispered against Titan's ear. Good boy." The dog's tail thumped once against her leg. She pulled out her phone and checked the screen. Still no signal. The jammer's range was wider than Marcus had estimated. She'd have to keep moving, get further from the cabin before she could call for help. But the pursuers were ahead of her now, between her and the logging road. The obvious path was blocked. Elena looked at Titan. The dog met her eyes with that uncanny intelligence she'd noticed from the moment they met. "Is there another way?" Titan rose and moved toward the opposite end of the hollow. He paused at the edge, looking back at her, waiting. Another way. Deeper into the wilderness, away from the roads and the phones and any hope of quick rescue. Elena thought about Jack, wounded and fighting back at the cabin. She thought about Marcus, a stranger who had risked everything to help them. She thought about the women in those photographs taken from their families, shipped like cargo to whatever horrors awaited. She followed the dog into the darkness. The path Titan chose led Elena through terrain that no human would have found in darkness. The dog moved with absolute certainty, weaving between boulders and fallen trees, always staying close enough for her to follow the pale flash of his undercoat. Her legs screamed with exhaustion. Her lungs ached from the cold air. But she kept moving because stopping meant dying, and dying meant those women would never be found. Titan suddenly halted. His body went rigid, head low, ears pinned back. Elena froze. She'd learned to trust his warnings. Voices drifted through the trees. Close. Too close. She couldn't make out words, but she recognized the cadence of men coordinating a search pattern. Titan pressed against her leg and guided her sideways off the faint trail and into a gap between two massive boulders. The space was barely wide enough for her shoulders. She squeezed through, feeling rock scrape against her back, and found herself in a narrow crevice that smelled of damp earth and old leaves. The dog followed his warm bulk, filling the space beside her. Footsteps approached. Heavy. Confident. Someone who wasn't worried about being heard. "She's not on the creek path." The voice was young, impatient. Maybe the dog took her higher. "Dogs don't think like that." An older voice, calmer. "They follow the path of least resistance. She's somewhere between here and the ridge. Walker wants her found in the next hour." Walker can want whatever he wants. These mountains don't care about his timeline. The footsteps paused directly outside the crevice. Elena could see the beam of a flashlight playing across the rocks above her head. One sweep lower, and they'd spot the gap. Titan's growl built in his chest so low she felt it more than heard it. She pressed her hand against his side, a silent plea for silence. The growl stopped. "Nothing here," the younger voice said. "Let's check the north ridge." The footsteps moved away. The flashlight beam disappeared. Elena counted to 100 before she moved. Her hands shook so badly she could barely grip the rock as she squeezed back out of the crevice. "That was too close," she whispered. Titan licked her hand once, then turned and continued up the slope. They had to keep moving. Every minute they stayed still was a minute the net tightened around them. The terrain grew steeper. Elena's boots slipped on wet rock, and twice she would have fallen if Titan hadn't braced against her. The dog seemed tireless, but she could see him favoring his left rear leg slightly. The old shrapnel injury Marcus had mentioned. Even heroes had limits. She checked her phone again. Still no signal. The jammer's range was incredible. Military grade, Marcus had said. What kind of trafficking operation had access to military grade equipment? The answer hit her like cold water. They weren't just corrupt cops. This operation had connections far beyond local law enforcement. The equipment, the coordination, the way they'd known exactly where to find Jack's tracker. Someone with serious resources was protecting this network. Titan stopped at the crest of a small ridge and looked back at her. In the faint moonlight breaking through the clouds, she could see his eyes reflecting amber. "Which way, boy?" The dog turned and began descending the other side. Elena followed, and as she crested the ridge, she saw it. Far below, nestled in a valley, a cluster of lights that didn't belong to any town she knew. Blackwell Shaft. The abandoned mine. Except it clearly wasn't abandoned anymore. She counted vehicles. 4 trucks, 2 SUVs, a van with no windows. Her stomach turned at the sight of that van. This was it. The hub of the operation. And it was crawling with activity even in the middle of the night. "We found it," she breathed. "Titan, we found it." The dog whined softly. His attention wasn't on the lights below. It was fixed on something behind them back the way they'd come. Elena turned. 3 flashlight beams were moving along the ridge they'd just crossed, converging on their position. They'd been spotted. Miles away, Marcus and Brennan pushed through Miller's Canyon with desperate speed. The deputy was struggling. His breathing came in ragged gasps, and twice Marcus had to catch him when his legs buckled. "We need to stop," Brennan wheezed. "We can't." 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. Every minute we stop is a minute Elena doesn't have. Brennan grabbed Marcus's arm, forcing him to halt. "If I collapse out here, you'll have to leave me. Is that what you want?" Marcus looked at the man. Pale face, blood-soaked bandage eyes that were starting to lose focus. Brennan was right. Pushing him to death served no one. 3 minutes. Sit on that rock. Drink water. Brennan slumped onto the boulder and pulled out the water bottle Marcus had given him. His hands trembled as he raised it to his lips. "Tell me about Elena's sister," Marcus said. Brennan looked up, surprised. "What? You said Elena joined the force because her sister disappeared. What happened?" "Rosa. Her name was Rosa Reyes." Brennan's voice softened. 18 years old. Worked at a diner near the highway. One night she didn't come home. Nobody saw anything. No witnesses, no leads, no body. When was this? 8 years ago. Elena was still in high school. She watched her parents fall apart, watched the police give up after 2 weeks. Something broke in her that day. And something else got forged. That's why she took this case. She didn't take it. She made it. Brennan shook his head. The first disappearance happened 6 months ago. A waitress from a truck stop. Nobody cared. But Elena noticed. She started connecting dots nobody else was looking at. Young women, vulnerable women, all within a 100-mile radius. All gone without a trace. And the department ignored her. Worse, they told her to drop it. Said she was wasting resources on runaways and drifters. Brennan's jaw tightened. I should have listened to her sooner. I should have pushed back harder. Instead, I just kept my head down like a good soldier. You're not keeping your head down now. No, I'm not. Brennan stood testing his legs. They held. 3 minutes is up. Let's move. They continued through the canyon, the terrain gradually leveling out. Marcus's internal clock told him they'd covered about 4 miles. The mine was still another 3 miles ahead, but they were making better time than expected. A sound stopped them both. Distant echoing off the rocks. An engine. No multiple engines. Coming from the direction of the mine. They're mobilizing, Marcus said. Something's happening. Elena, maybe, or maybe they're moving the victims before dawn. Brennan's face hardened. We have to get there. Now. They broke into a jog, ignoring the pain, ignoring the exhaustion. The engine sounds grew louder, then began to fade, heading in a different direction. Marcus grabbed Brennan's arm and pulled him behind a rock formation. Wait! Headlights appeared on the old logging road below them. A convoy of 3 vehicles moving fast, heading east, away from the mine. They're running, Brennan said. They're abandoning the operation. No. Marcus watched the vehicles disappear around a bend. Those are pursuit vehicles. They're going after Elena. How do you know? Because that van in the middle, that's a mobile command unit. They're coordinating the hunt from there. Brennan stared at the empty road. She led them away. She drew them off. She's smart. She knows the evidence on her phone is the priority. As long as they're chasing her, they're not protecting the mine. But she's giving us a window. Marcus started moving again. We can't waste it. Elena ran. Gone was any pretense of stealth. The flashlight beams behind her were gaining, and her only advantage was the head start Titan had given her. The dog ran beside her occasionally, darting ahead to check the path, then falling back to guide her around obstacles she couldn't see. Her lungs burned. Her legs felt like they were filled with sand. But she kept running because somewhere behind those lights were men who would kill her without hesitation. A shot cracked through the air. Then another. The bullets went wide, but the message was clear. They weren't trying to capture her anymore. They were trying to stop her any way they could. Tighten faster! The dog surged ahead, leading her down a steep embankment that her rational mind would have refused in daylight. She half ran, half slid, grabbing at roots and branches to control her descent. At the bottom, a creek. Shallow, maybe knee-deep, but the current was strong with runoff from the storm. Titan splashed through without hesitation. Elena followed, gasping at the cold that stabbed through her boots and up her legs. On the far bank, the terrain opened slightly. She could move faster here, but so could her pursuers. Another shot. Closer this time. Bark exploded from a tree trunk 2 feet to her left. Stop running, a voice bellowed behind her. You're only making this harder. She didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The evidence on her phone was the only thing that mattered now. Titan suddenly veered left away from the path she'd been following. She trusted him and followed. 20 yards later, she understood why. The ground ahead dropped away into a ravine. If she'd kept running straight, she would have gone over the edge in the darkness. The dog had just saved her life. Again. But the detour cost her time. The flashlight beams were closer now, close enough that she could hear individual footsteps, individual voices. There, I see her. Elena pushed harder, drawing on reserves she didn't know she had. Titan ran beside her, his breathing heavy, now his limp more pronounced. Even he was reaching his limits. The forest thinned. Through the trees she could see open ground ahead. A meadow, a clearing. Either way, it was a death trap. Open ground meant no cover. She skidded to a stop at the tree line. Titan stopped beside her, pressing against her leg. His whine was urgent, conflicted. Behind her, the pursuers closed in. Ahead, nothing but empty space, and the mountains beyond. I don't know what to do, she whispered to the dog. I don't know where to go. Titan looked at her. Then he looked at the meadow. Then back at her. And he started walking forward. Not running. Walking. Calm and deliberate into the open ground. Elena's heart nearly stopped. Titan, no comeback. The dog paused at the edge of the clearing and looked back at her. His eyes seemed to say, "Trust me." She stepped out of the trees. Nothing happened. No shots. No shouts. Just the wind and the distant rumble of thunder. Then she saw why. At the far end of the clearing, barely visible against the dark sky, a structure. A building. And beside it the angular shape of what could only be a radio tower. A ranger station. An abandoned ranger station with a communications tower. Oh my God! Elena started running again, fresh hope flooding her exhausted body. Titan, you genius! You absolute genius! They crossed the meadow together. Behind them, the first pursuer broke from the tree line and shouted in fury. Elena reached the station and threw herself against the door. Locked. Rusted shut. She slammed her shoulder into it once, twice, 3 times. The door held. Come on, come on, come on! Titan circled the building at a run. A moment later, she heard the crash of breaking glass from the back. She followed the sound and found a shattered window. Titan stood inside, waiting for her. Elena climbed through, ignoring the glass that cut her palms. The station was dusty, abandoned for years, but the equipment was still there. Radio consoles, emergency transmitters, backup power systems. Please work, she prayed. Please, please work. She found the main power switch and threw it. Nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. No, 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 no. Titan barked sharply. He was standing near a generator in the corner, pawing at the fuel tank. Elena rushed over. The tank was empty, but beside it sat 2 jerry cans of emergency fuel. She grabbed one, nearly dropping it with her bleeding hands, and poured fuel into the generator's tank. Footsteps outside. Getting closer. She finished pouring and grabbed the generator's pull cord. 1 yank. Nothing. 2 yanks. A cough and sputter. The door rattled. Someone was trying to force it open. 3rd yank. The generator roared to life. Lights flickered throughout the station. Equipment hummed. A red light on the radio console turned green. Elena threw herself at the console and grabbed the microphone. Mayday! Mayday! This is Officer Elena Reyes, Colorado State Police Badge number 7429. I am at the old ranger station on Miller's Ridge, under pursuit by armed suspects. Request immediate assistance. I have evidence of a human trafficking operation involving corrupt law enforcement. Repeat, corrupt law enforcement. I need help. Please, someone answer. Static. Endless static. Then, Officer Reyes, this is Colorado State Patrol Dispatch. We copy your transmission. Confirm your location and situation. The front door burst open. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway. Behind him, 2 others. They raised their weapons. Step away from that radio, Elena keyed the microphone one more time. Blackwell Shaft Mine. That's where they're keeping the victims. Blackwell Shaft. Send everyone. She released the mic just as the first man crossed the room and knocked her to the ground. At the Blackwell Shaft Mine, Marcus and Brennan watched from the ridgeline as chaos erupted below. The convoy had left only a skeleton crew. 4 men, maybe 5, guarding a dozen vehicles and whatever lay inside the mine itself. That radio transmission, Brennan whispered. You heard it. Marcus nodded. He'd tuned his handheld to emergency frequencies, hoping the jammer's range had limits. Elena's voice had come through scratchy but clear. She'd done it. She'd gotten the message out. State Patrol will respond, Brennan said. But it'll take time. An hour, maybe more. We don't have an hour. Marcus pointed toward the mine entrance. Look. Men were emerging with boxes. Heavy boxes that 2 people struggled to carry. They were loading them into the remaining vehicles. They're destroying evidence, Brennan realized. Or moving it. Either way, once those vehicles leave, we lose everything. There's 5 of them and 2 of us. You said yourself we can't win a direct fight. Marcus studied the layout below. The guards were focused on the loading, not perimeter security. They thought the threat was chasing Elena through the forest, not standing on the ridge above them. We don't need to win, Marcus said slowly. We just need to delay. How? You see that fuel truck by the main building? Brennan looked. His eyes widened. Cole, that's insane. Probably. Marcus was already moving down the slope. Stay here. When things get loud, circle to the mine entrance. If there are victims inside, get them out. What are you going to do? Marcus didn't answer. He melted into the darkness, moving with the silent efficiency of a predator who had hunted in far more dangerous places than this. Brennan watched him go, his heart pounding against his ribs. Then he started his own descent toward the mine, praying that Elena's message had been heard, and that help would come before they all died on this mountain. The man's boot pressed against Elena's spine, pinning her to the floor of the ranger station. Her cheek scraped against the dusty concrete. Blood dripped from her hands where the glass had cut them. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, the man said. Elena laughed. It came out broken, half sob, half defiance. The message is already out. State Patrol knows everything. State Patrol! The man crouched beside her, grabbing a fistful of her hair and yanking her head back. You think they're coming to save you? Half of them are on our payroll. You're lying. Am I? He released her hair and stood. Walker, get in here. Sergeant Walker stepped through the broken doorway. His face was calm, controlled, but his eyes burned with barely contained fury. Officer Reyes, you've caused us considerable trouble tonight. Good. Walker knelt beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive. Something that didn't belong on a sergeant's salary. The transmission you sent will be intercepted and buried. The rangers who might have responded are 3 hours away, and the State Patrol dispatcher who took your call. He smiled. She's been with us for 4 years. Elena's heart sank, but she refused to let him see it. You can't stop all of it. The evidence is out there now. What evidence? Your phone. Walker pulled it from his pocket. Her phone. They'd taken it while she was pinned down. Waterproof case. Very smart, but not smart enough. He dropped the phone on the concrete and crushed it under his heel. The screen shattered. The case cracked. Everything she'd fought for destroyed in a single motion. No. Elena lunged, but the man behind her slammed her back down. Where's your partner? Walker asked calmly. Deputy Brennan. Dead. The crash killed him. Interesting. Because we found blood at the cabin, but no body. And Marcus Cole's truck is missing. Walker leaned closer. Where are they, Elena? I don't know. I think you do. I don't know. Walker sighed and stood. We don't have time for this. The operation is compromised. We're moving everyone tonight. Sir? One of the men stepped forward. What do we do with her? Walker looked down at Elena. His expression held nothing. No anger, no regret. Just cold calculation. She disappears, like all the others. Poetic, really. Elena's blood turned to ice. Take her to the mine. Put her with the rest of them. When we're done loading, we seal the shaft. You can't. I can do whatever I want. Walker turned away. That's what power means, Officer Reyes. I thought you would have learned that by now. They dragged her out of the ranger station. Titan was nowhere to be seen. In the chaos, he must have escaped through the broken window. She prayed he had. She prayed he would survive. Even if she didn't. The van waited outside. Windowless. Black. The door slid open, revealing darkness within. They threw her inside. At Blackwell Shaft, Marcus reached the fuel truck without being detected. The guards were focused on loading boxes from the mine. They moved with frantic urgency, shouting orders, dropping equipment in their haste. Whatever Elena's transmission had done, it had scared them. Good. Scared men made mistakes. Marcus crouched beside the fuel truck and examined the tank. Full. At least 200 gallons of diesel. Enough to create exactly the kind of distraction he needed. He pulled out his knife and began cutting the fuel line. Above him on the ridge, Brennan watched the operation unfold. His head throbbed with every heartbeat, and his vision kept trying to blur at the edges. The head wound was worse than he'd admitted, maybe worse than he'd realized. But he couldn't stop now. Not when Elena needed him. Not when those women needed him. He started down the slope toward the mine entrance, staying low, using the rocks for cover. Every step sent pain shooting through his skull. He ignored it. Pain was temporary. Death was permanent. The mine entrance gaped like a black mouth against the mountainside. 2 guards stood at either side, weapons ready, watching the vehicles being loaded. Brennan circled wide, looking for another way in. The old mining operation would have multiple shafts, ventilation tunnels, emergency exits. There had to be another entry point. He found it 50 yards east of the main entrance. A rusted grate covering a narrow tunnel barely wide enough for a man to crawl through. The grate was locked, but the metal had corroded with decades of neglect. Brennan worked silently, prying at the grate with his bare hands. His fingers bled. His arms shook. But the metal gave way inch by inch, until the grate swung open on screaming hinges. He froze. Waited. No one came. He crawled into the darkness. The van bounced over rough terrain, throwing Elena against the metal walls. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back. Her shoulders burned from the unnatural position. 2 men sat in the back with her. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. Their presence was message enough. Elena closed her eyes and tried to think. The phone was destroyed, but the transmission had gone out. Even if the dispatcher was corrupt, someone else might have heard. Emergency frequencies were monitored by multiple agencies. There had to be someone honest. There had to be. The van stopped. The rear door slid open. They pulled her out into the night air. The mine loomed before her, its entrance lit by harsh work lights that cast everything in stark shadows. Move. They pushed her toward the entrance. Her legs nearly buckled, but she forced herself to walk. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of dragging her. Inside the mine stretched into darkness. The air smelled of damp earth and something else, something human. Fear, desperation. The accumulated terror of women who had been held here against their will. They passed through a series of tunnels descending deeper into the mountain. The temperature dropped. The sounds from outside faded. Elena felt the weight of the earth pressing down above her. Finally, they reached a heavy metal door. One of the men unlocked it and shoved her inside. Elena stumbled and fell. Her hands couldn't catch her. She hit the ground hard, pain exploding through her shoulder. The door slammed shut behind her. For a moment, she lay still, gasping. Then she heard it. Breathing. Multiple people breathing in the darkness around her. "Hello," she whispered. Silence. Then a voice, young and terrified. "Who are you?" "My name is Elena. I'm a police officer." "Police," the voice cracked with something between hope and hysteria. "Police put us here." Elena's heart broke. I know they did, but I'm not with them. I'm here to help." "Help?" A different voice, now older, bitter. "Nobody helps. Nobody comes." "I came." Elena struggled to her knees, then to her feet. "How many of you are there?" A pause. Then the first voice again. 11. There were 12, but Maria... The voice trailed off into a sob. 11 women, trapped in darkness, waiting for a fate Elena couldn't bear to imagine. "Listen to me," she said, forcing strength into her voice. "Help is coming. I sent a message. People know about this place now. They'll kill us before help comes. They always said they would. They won't. I won't let them. How you're locked in here with us?" Elena didn't have an answer. Her hands were bound. Her phone was destroyed. She was trapped in the belly of a mountain with no way out. But she refused to give up. She refused to let these women die in the dark. "What are your names?" she asked. "Tell me your names." One by one they answered. Maria's sister, Anna. A college student named Jennifer. A mother named Teresa, who had been taken from a parking lot while her children waited in the car. Each name was a life. Each life was worth fighting for. "I promise you," Elena said, "we are getting out of here. All of us. Together." In the darkness, someone started to cry. Not from despair, from something that had been dead for weeks flickering back to life. Hope. Marcus finished cutting the fuel line and stepped back as diesel began pooling on the ground. The smell was overwhelming, but the guards were too focused on their work to notice. He moved to the next phase of his plan. The generator powering the work lights sat 30 feet from the fuel truck. An exposed cable ran along the ground, poorly secured, vulnerable. Marcus pulled out his knife again. One cut. That's all it would take. One cut, and the exposed wire would spark against the spreading fuel. He positioned himself, raised the knife. A hand closed around his wrist. Marcus spun knife, redirecting toward the new threat. He stopped the blade a millimeter from flesh. Titan! The German shepherd stood beside him, wet and muddy, but very much alive. His eyes gleamed in the dim light. His tail wagged once. "Where's Elena?" Titan whined and looked toward the mine entrance, toward the vehicles, toward the van that had arrived minutes ago. "They brought her here." Another whine, more urgent. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. The plan had to change. He couldn't blow the fuel truck with Elena inside the mine. The explosion might collapse the tunnels. He resheathed his knife and looked at the dog. "Can you find her?" Titan's ears perked forward. He turned and started toward the mine entrance, then looked back, waiting. Marcus followed. Brennan crawled through the narrow tunnel, his shoulders scraping against rock, his head pounding with every movement. The darkness was absolute. He couldn't see his own hands in front of his face, but he could hear voices ahead, echoing through the stone. He pushed forward, ignoring the pain, ignoring the claustrophobia clawing at his mind. Elena was somewhere in here. The women were somewhere in here. He had to find them. The tunnel opened into a wider passage. Brennan could stand now, though he had to hunch to avoid the ceiling. He pressed himself against the wall and listened. Footsteps, coming closer. He drew the pistol Marcus had given him and held his breath. A figure passed the junction ahead. One man carrying a flashlight, moving with the casual pace of someone not expecting trouble. Brennan waited until the footsteps faded. Then he continued forward. The passage branched, left or right. He had no way to know which led to the prisoners. Then he heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Elena's voice. He went left. In the holding cell, Elena had managed to work her zip ties against a rough edge of rock. The plastic was cutting into her wrists, drawing blood, but she could feel it weakening. "How much longer?" Anna whispered. "Almost there." The door rattled. Someone was unlocking it. Elena froze. Then she pressed herself against the wall beside the door hands, still behind her back, hoping the darkness would hide her position. The door swung open. Light flooded in. A single man stepped through. "Time to move. All of you. On your feet." Nobody moved. "I said move." Elena struck. Her hands weren't free, but her legs worked fine. She swept the man's feet out from under him. He went down hard, flashlight spinning away. The women surged forward, 11 desperate people, half-starved and terrified, but fighting for their lives. They swarmed the fallen guard, pinning him down, grabbing for his weapon. Elena finally snapped the weakened zip tie. Her hands came free, screaming with pain, as blood rushed back into her fingers. She grabbed the guard's gun and pressed it against his temple. "How many others?" "You're dead," he spat. "You're all dead." "How many? 6, 8? Doesn't matter. You'll never get out." Elena looked at the women. Frightened faces, desperate eyes, but standing, fighting. "We'll see about that." She zip-tied the guard with his own restraints and took his radio, his keys, his backup weapon. Then she distributed what she had among the strongest-looking women. "Stay together. Stay quiet. Follow me." They moved into the tunnel. Marcus and Titan reached the mine entrance just as gunfire erupted deep inside. The guards spun toward the sound, confused weapons raised. They weren't expecting trouble from within. Marcus used their distraction. He moved like a shadow, striking the first guard from behind before the man even knew he was there. The second turned weapon coming up, but Titan was already airborne. The dog hit the man chest high, bearing him to the ground in a controlled takedown. "Guard," Marcus commanded, and Titan pinned the man with teeth at his throat, not biting, just promising. More gunfire from inside. Shouts. Chaos. Marcus grabbed a flashlight and plunged into the darkness. The tunnel twisted and branched. He navigated by sound, following the echoes of combat, the screams, the desperate cries for help. He found Brennan first. The deputy was backed against a wall, bleeding from a new wound on his arm, holding off 2 attackers with his nearly empty pistol. Marcus hit them from behind. Fast, brutal, efficient. The first man went down to a chokehold. The second took a knife to the shoulder and collapsed, screaming. Brennan stared at him. "Cole? Where's Elena?" "Ahead. She got free somehow. She's got the women. They're trying to reach the surface. How many hostiles? I've seen 4, took down 2. That leaves at least 2 more. Plus Walker. A scream echoed through the tunnels. A woman's scream, but not Elena's. They ran. Elena fired twice, dropping the man who had grabbed Jennifer. The college student scrambled backward, sobbing but alive. "Keep moving!" Elena shouted. "Don't stop!" The women surged forward. They were close now. Elena could feel fresh air coming from somewhere ahead. Walker stepped out of a side tunnel. He moved faster than Elena expected. His hand caught her wrist, twisted, and the gun went flying. His other hand closed around her throat. "You should have stayed quiet, Officer Reyes. You should have looked the other way like everyone else." Elena clawed at his grip. Black spots danced in her vision. "Your sister looked the same way when she died. Confused, betrayed, wondering why nobody saved her." The words hit harder than any blow. Rosa. He knew about Rosa. "You killed her," Elena gasped. "She was my first. I was sloppy back then, left evidence, but I learned." Walker's grip tightened. "I learned that the only way to build something lasting is to eliminate everyone who gets too close to the truth." Elena's vision was narrowing. Her lungs screamed for air. Then Titan hit Walker like a missile. The German Shepherd's jaws closed around Walker's arm, tearing him away from Elena. The sergeant screamed, falling back, trying to fight off 80 pounds of focused fury. Elena gasped for breath, crawling away, searching for the dropped gun. Marcus burst from the tunnel and tackled Walker as Titan released. He pinned the sergeant to the ground with the cold efficiency of a man who had done this 1,000 times before. "It's over," Marcus said. Walker laughed. Blood streamed from his arm where Titan had bitten him, but he laughed. "Nothing is over. This operation is bigger than one mine, bigger than one state. Kill me and 10 more take my place. Then they'll fall too." Red and blue lights suddenly flashed at the mine entrance. Sirens wailed. Helicopter rotors thundered overhead. Brennan appeared leaning heavily against the wall, but smiling. "State Patrol. Real State Patrol. Elena's message got through after all. Someone honest was listening." Walker's laughter died. His face went pale. Elena found her voice. It was raw, broken, but strong. "My sister's name was Rosa. You took her from us 8 years ago, and I've spent every day since then waiting for this moment." She looked at the officers flooding into the mine, at the women being led to safety, at Titan standing guard over the man who had destroyed so many lives. "Get him out of my sight." They dragged Walker away. He didn't struggle. He didn't speak. The architect of an empire of suffering finally facing the justice he'd spent years avoiding. Elena sank to her knees. The adrenaline was fading. The pain was setting in. Everything she'd endured in the last 12 hours crashed over her like a wave. Titan approached slowly and pressed his head against her shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, wrapping her arms around the dog's neck. "Thank you for finding me." Titan's tail wagged gently. He licked the tears from her cheek. Somewhere outside, the sun was beginning to rise. The longest night of Elena's life was finally ending. But she knew the real work was just beginning. The helicopter lifted Elena from the mine entrance as the first rays of sunlight broke over the mountains. Medical personnel worked on her wounds, asking questions she couldn't process, shining lights in her eyes she couldn't focus on. All she could see was Titan's face watching her from the ground below. Marcus held the dog's collar, keeping him steady as the rotor wash beat against them. Even from that distance, even through the blur of exhaustion and tears, she could see the dog straining toward her. "We've got 11 survivors," someone said into a radio. Multiple injuries, severe dehydration, psychological trauma. We need every available unit at County General. 11. Elena closed her eyes. 11 women who would go home to their families. 11 women who would see another sunrise because she hadn't given up. But not Rosa. Never Rosa. Officer Reyes. A paramedic leaned over her. Can you hear me? We're taking you to the hospital. The others, she managed. The women from the mine. They're being evacuated. Everyone's getting out. And Walker. The paramedic hesitated. In custody. State police have him. Elena let out a breath she'd been holding for 8 years. It wasn't relief exactly. It was something deeper. Something that felt like the first crack in a wall she'd built around her heart the day Rosa disappeared. At County General Hospital, the emergency room erupted into controlled chaos. Ambulances arrived in waves, each carrying survivors from the mine. Doctors and nurses moved with urgent precision, triaging patients, calling for specialists, doing everything in their power to undo the damage of months of captivity. Elena refused treatment until she'd seen every woman brought in safely. Ma'am, you need stitches. Your hands are after, she said. After they're all here. She stood in the corridor, wrapped in a shock blanket, watching the stretchers roll past. Anna. Jennifer. Teresa. She counted each face, matching them to the names she'd learned in the darkness of that cell. 10. Where was the 11th? A commotion at the entrance. Shouting. Then Jack Brennan appeared, supported by 2 paramedics fighting to stay conscious. Jack. Elena pushed through the medical staff and grabbed his hand. His eyes found hers. A weak smile crossed his battered face. You made it, he whispered. You came after me. You came into that mine. Told you, partners don't leave partners. His eyes rolled back. The machine started screaming. Medical personnel swarmed around him, pushing Elena aside, shouting orders she couldn't understand. What's happening, Jack? He's crashing. Get her out of here. No, Jack. Strong hands pulled her away from the gurney. She fought, but she had nothing left. Her legs gave out. Someone caught her before she hit the floor. Easy, easy, I've got you. Marcus. She recognized his voice before she saw his face. They're killing him, she sobbed. He came to save me, and now he's fighting. That's what he does. Marcus lowered her into a chair. That's what you all do. Elena looked up at him. This stranger who had risked everything for people he didn't know, who had walked into a war zone because 2 desperate cops knocked on his door. Why? She asked. Why did you help us? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of memories he rarely shared. 5 years ago, I lost my entire team in Afghanistan. 6 men, my brothers. We were set up by someone we trusted. Bad intel, ambush. I was the only one who walked out. Elena's breath caught. I came to these mountains to disappear, to stop being the person who survived when everyone else died. But tonight you showed up at my door and I realized something. He met her eyes. Surviving isn't enough. It never was. The only thing that gives it meaning is what you do with the time you've been given. A doctor emerged from the trauma bay. Elena shot to her feet. Deputy Brennan. The doctor's face was impossible to read. He's stable. We've stopped the internal bleeding. The head trauma is significant, but he's conscious and asking for you. Elena nearly collapsed with relief. Can I see him? 5 minutes. He needs rest. She found Jack in a private room surrounded by machines and tubes. His head was wrapped in fresh bandages. His face was pale as paper, but his eyes were open and they found her immediately. "Hey, partner." Elena took his hand. The tears came and she didn't try to stop them. "Don't ever scare me like that again." "No promises." He tried to smile and winced. "Did we get them, the women?" "All 11. They're safe. And Walker, in custody, along with 4 of his men." Jack closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they glistened with something she'd never seen in him before: vulnerability. "Elena, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said a long time ago." "Jack, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He squeezed her hand weakly. "When you first came to me with this case, I thought you were chasing ghosts. I thought your sister's disappearance had made you see patterns that weren't there. I almost shut you down. But you didn't. Because I saw how hard you fought, how much you believed. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing a traumatized rookie and started seeing the best cop I've ever worked with." Elena's throat tightened. "You saved those women tonight," Jack continued. "You exposed a network that's been operating for years. You did what nobody else could do." "I didn't do it alone." "No. But you started it. You never gave up." He paused, gathering strength. "Your sister would be proud of you, Elena. I know I am." She leaned down and pressed her forehead against his shoulder, letting the tears soak into his hospital gown. Years of grief, years of fighting, years of refusing to let Rosa become just another forgotten victim. It all poured out of her in that sterile room. Jack's hand rested on her hair, gentle and steady. "Rest now," he murmured. "We've got time." The investigation that followed shook Colorado law enforcement to its core. Walker's arrest was just the beginning. The evidence recovered from Blackwell Shaft revealed a network spanning 3 states. 14 officers across multiple agencies were implicated. Bank records shipping, manifests, communication logs, everything Elena had photographed before her phone was destroyed had been backed up automatically to a cloud server she'd set up months ago. Walker never knew. None of them did. The FBI took over the case within 48 hours. Elena spent the next week in endless interviews providing testimony, identifying suspects, walking federal agents through every detail of the operation she'd uncovered. On the 8th day, they found Rosa. An agent named Patterson delivered the news personally. He came to Elena's hospital room. She'd finally agreed to treatment for her injuries and sat beside her bed with a folder in his hands. "We recovered remains from a secondary site Walker identified during questioning. Dental records confirmed the identity this morning." Elena stared at the folder. She didn't reach for it. "She's really gone." "Yes. I'm sorry." 8 years. 8 years of searching, hoping, refusing to accept what everyone else had already concluded. And now, finally, the truth. "Where?" Elena's voice was barely audible. "A property in the mountains. Isolated. Walker used it in the early days before he got more organized." Patterson paused. "She wasn't alone. We found 3 other victims at the same site. Their families are being notified." 3 other victims. 3 other Rosas with families who had spent years wondering. "Thank you," Elena said, "for telling me yourself." Patterson nodded and stood. At the door, he turned back. "Officer Reyes, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen a lot of cases fall apart because people gave up too soon. What you did pursuing this investigation when everyone told you to stop, that's the reason 11 women are alive today. Don't forget that." He left. Elena sat alone with the folder, with the confirmation of what she'd always known and always feared. Rosa was never coming home. But because of Rosa, others would. 2 weeks after the rescue, Elena stood outside Marcus Cole's cabin. The damage from the attack had been repaired. New windows, new door, fresh paint on the frame. The mountain air smelled of pine and approaching winter. Titan bounded toward her before she'd even closed her car door. The dog's tail wagged furiously as he circled her legs, demanding attention. "Hey, boy." Elena knelt and buried her face in his fur. "Hey, hero." Marcus appeared on the porch, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked different in daylight, less like a warrior, more like a man who'd found something worth protecting. "Wasn't expecting you," he said. "I should have called." "No, it's good." He descended the steps and stood beside her. "How's Brennan?" "Out of the hospital. Desk duty for the next 6 months while he recovers. He hates it." "He'll survive. He wants to thank you personally, soon as he's mobile." Marcus nodded, but said nothing. Elena straightened, keeping her hand on Titan's head. "I came to ask you something." "Ask." "The FBI is forming a task force, multi-state investigation into trafficking networks. They want people with specific skills, people who can operate in remote areas, handle communications equipment, work outside normal channels when necessary." Marcus's expression didn't change. "You're recruiting me. I'm offering you a choice. You can stay up here alone, or you can help us find more operations like Walker's. There are other Blackwell shafts out there, other women in the dark waiting for someone to find them." Silence stretched between them. Titan looked up at Marcus, then at Elena, as if following the conversation. "I came to these mountains to disappear," Marcus said finally. "I know. I told myself I was done fighting other people's wars. I know that too." Marcus looked out at the peaks surrounding his cabin. The home he'd built as a fortress against the world. "Titan would be good at that work," he said slowly. "He's trained for it. Might be wasted up here chasing squirrels." Elena's heart lifted. "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe." But something had shifted in his eyes. Something that looked almost like hope. "When would this task force start?" "Next month. Training facility in Denver. They want Titan too. He's already been nominated for a service commendation." He'd hate the ceremony. He'd tolerate it for the treats. Marcus almost smiled. "Almost. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Marcus, that night at the cabin when you let us in, you said something. You said surviving isn't enough, that the only thing that gives it meaning is what you do with the time you've been given." "I remember. I spent 8 years surviving. Surviving Rosa's disappearance, surviving the system that failed her, surviving everyone who told me to move on." Elena's voice strengthened. "I'm done surviving. I want to fight. I want to make sure what happened to Rosa never happens to anyone else's sister." She met his eyes. "I think you want the same thing. I think that's why you're still alive." She walked back to her car without waiting for a response. Titan followed her to the door, tail wagging, then returned to Marcus's side as she drove away. Man and dog stood together, watching the dust settle on the mountain road. "She's not wrong," Marcus said quietly. Titan looked up at him and huffed. "Yeah, I know." 6 months later, Elena stood before a crowd of law enforcement officials, federal agents, and media representatives. Behind her, a display showed photographs of recovered victims, arrested perpetrators, and seized evidence. Operation Safe Harbor has resulted in the arrest of 47 individuals across 4 states, she announced. "We have recovered 19 victims and shut down 3 major trafficking routes. This work continues." And applause filled the room. Camera flashes strobed. In the front row, Jack Brennan sat with a cane across his knees, clapping harder than anyone. His recovery had been slow, but steady. The head injury had left him with occasional headaches and a slight tremor in his left hand, but his mind was sharp as ever. He'd been promoted to lieutenant, heading a new unit dedicated to missing persons investigations. Beside him, Marcus Cole sat uncomfortably in a suit he clearly despised. Titan lay at his feet, wearing a service vest decorated with commendation ribbons. The dog had become something of a celebrity, the German Shepherd, who helped bring down a trafficking ring. Marcus bore the attention with stoic patience. After the ceremony, Elena found them in the parking lot, Marcus already loosening his tie. "Good speech," he said. "I hate speeches." "Couldn't tell." Titan pressed against Elena's leg, and she scratched behind his ears automatically. The bond between them had only deepened over the months of working together. "Next operation briefing is Monday," she said. "There's a lead on a network operating out of Nevada, similar pattern to Walker's organization." "I saw the file." And Marcus looked at Titan, then at Elena, then at the mountains visible on the horizon. "I'm in." Jack limped over to join them, leaning heavily on his cane. "Well, that's settled. Now can we please get out of these monkey suits and find some real food?" Elena laughed. It felt good. It felt natural. Something she'd almost forgotten how to do. "There's a diner down the road. Best burgers in the county." "Does it allow dogs?" "It will when they see his medals." They walked together toward Marcus's truck. The former SEAL, the wounded deputy, the detective who refused to quit, and the German Shepherd who had changed everything. Behind them, the sun set over the Rocky Mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere in the darkness of the world, women were still waiting to be found. Children were still crying for mothers who might never come home. Families were still searching for answers that nobody wanted to give. But they weren't alone anymore. Because sometimes, in the darkest moments when all hope seems lost, and every path leads to despair, a door opens. A stranger chooses to help. A loyal heart refuses to surrender. And everything changes. Rosa Reyes never came home. Her story ended in a shallow grave on a mountain she'd never seen. But her memory lived on in every victim Elena saved, every network she dismantled, every family she reunited. Some losses can't be undone. Some wounds never fully heal. But the choice of what we do with our pain that belongs to us alone. Elena chose to fight. Marcus chose to hope again. And Titan chose what he'd always chosen from the first moment he heard desperate knocking on a cabin door in the middle of a storm. He chose to protect. Not because he was commanded, not because he was trained, but because that's what loyalty means, showing up when it matters most, standing firm when others run, and never ever leaving behind the people you love. The mountains held their secrets. The world kept spinning, and somewhere on a dark highway, a task force vehicle rolled toward another mission, another chance to bring light into places that had known only shadow. In the back seat, Titan rested his head on Elena's lap. Amber eyes half closed, breathing steady and calm, ready for whatever came next. Because heroes aren't born in moments of glory. They're forged in moments of choice. And the choice to stand up to fight back, to protect the innocent, and pursue the guilty, that choice is available to anyone. All it takes is the courage to answer the knock at the door. If this story moved, you share it with someone who needs to remember that quiet courage still changes the world. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of unexpected heroes, unlikely allies, and the bonds that save us. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of this story stayed with you the most. And remember, no matter how dark the night, dawn always comes to those who refuse to stop fighting.